Disney Plus is bringing the X-Men out of the 90s, but they want to take the 90s out of the X-Men. We'll talk about it here on That Park Place. Hello, folks. Welcome back to the place where all the news should be fun. Sometimes it is not. Joining us, though, to make it as fun as it can be is LW Ghost. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here or anywhere for that matter. You know, as a ghost, I get around, but this is a fun place to be.
Same here, like Nightcrawler, just teleporting each and every place. This is an article, though, out of Entertainment Weekly by Nick Romano. X-Men 97 exclusive look reveals legacy costumes Theo James as a mystery fan favorite. But they are definitely burying the biggest news in this article. I want to go down now. Remind everybody that we have someone named DeMaio, Bo DeMaio, who is leading this effort. And unlike what you would probably anticipate in a normal world, which is that if you wanted to change the X-Men, you'd start your own X-Men show, they've decided to go back, grab the 90s X-Men, and retrofit it into the modern message. Here's what Bo DeMaio says about this animated series, which we'll have reviews of, folks, coming out on Disney+. He says, every design choice is actually a clue to the storylines we're doing. Nothing is arbitrary. Remember that. Nothing is arbitrary. He continues on, it's a nice nod to Pride of the X-Men, but it is to throw the X-Men back to a time where they're thinking about what part of this do I want to keep? Was it truly simpler back then? Or were we just more naive? Again, talking about the 90s when they come out of. Talking about the graduation day, which was the finale for the series before they decided to resurrect this thing and throw it into the modern day. We've got this out of another individual working on it. Some fans said that when the show ended the last time 30 years ago, they felt like it was cut short. Well, finally, you're getting that more. You'll be able to find out what happened next. The problem, though, is that they don't want to give you what's next as it would have been back then. They want to modify it for the modern era. Going back to what DeMaio says, then I want to get you, Mr. Ghost, in on this. DeMaio says, it's always interesting to take Xavier's dream and turn it on its head. When I first came to this, I was thinking about the world of the 90s, or what the 90s was like, even issues of social acceptance, and what does it mean to be different? It was so much more simplistic than it is today. The X-Men spent years telling humanity to embrace the future, walk into the future together. What happens when they get hit with a future they didn't see coming? What does it feel like to be on the other end when you feel like that future is leaving you behind? Now, what we found out is that they want to make this fit the mold of today. You can see down here, another individual named Zahn working on this. Says Rogue is still Rogue and has the same issues. A lot of folks can relate to that, to her wanting to be loved, wanting to belong, wanting to be touched, and not being accepted for who they are. There's the switcheroo. Rogue, you see, is a woman in love with a man, and she cannot be touched. But that is not apropos for the day. They say there's a lot of LGBTQ folks who tell me that they really can relate to her because of the same reasons. Rogue really embodies that because she always seems to be struggling with it, accepting herself for who she is, warts and all. And I don't think that's actually part of the character at all. Rogue struggles because she wants to be embraced, because she wants to be fully feminine, and she cannot be fully feminine. Yes. She's a woman who is missing that caress, the part of femininity that reaches out and wants to take care of, wants to console, wants to embrace, and she can't do any of that. It's a marker for traditional values tremendously.
Absolutely, so, it is.
Lou, tell us what's wrong with the 90s, that we had to bring a show out of the 90s and then extricate the 90s from it.
To prepare for this, I went into Google and I said, major events in the 90s. Are you ready for some of the things that were happening in the 90s, just to refresh people's memory or people who didn't live it? The end of the Soviet Union, Bill Clinton, Mandela becomes president of South Africa, the LA riots, NAFTA, TWA Flight 800, the reunification of Germany, O.J. Simpson, the Oklahoma City bombing, the Columbine massacre, the Hubble Space Telescope, and the Gulf War. I don't see anything in there that relates to changing a woman into a woman with different desires. Do you?
I don't even think some of the nomenclature of today existed back then. And that's what's so interesting, Lou, because they're taking, for example, there's the character morph, and there's articles all over the web that are attacking those who disagree with this, as they always do. But the character Morph from the show is now being listed as non-binary. But that's a term that didn't even exist back in the 90s. It's a concept that didn't... We've come up with that since then. So it feels so artificial and out of place in this show because this is supposed to be in the 90s.
In the 90s and before, binary had to do with base 2 versus base 10. It was a computer term.
Exactly. Well, let's get into just how far this goes. I want people to understand what we're talking about here. It says, as for the other familiar characters, Ray Chase will now voice Cyclops / Scott Summers. Jennifer Hale will voice Jean Grey, and that's a change. AJ Lo-Cascio will voice Gambit / Remy LeBeau. Holly Chow will voice Jubilee, and it keeps going. But if we go down to this paragraph, this is so important for us to see. There's still a place for other veteran actors of X-Men the Animated Series. Well, isn't that nice? Catherine Disher, the original Jean Grey, is now voicing Dr. Valerie Cooper. Chris Potter, the original Gambit, is now playing Cable. Now, why have all of these veteran actors, the original voice actors, why have they been moved to other roles, to secondary and tertiary roles? Well, because they're inauthentic now. Because they're not the correct race, or they're not the correct creed, or they're not the correct color for the character that they always pretended to play. And that is, I think we're reaching a terrifying time, Lou, when actors are no longer allowed to act and pretend to be something they are not. And it gets more scary the closer you make that.
Because they're voice actors.
Yes.
I hate to break it to Mr. DeMeo, but Robin Williams wasn't a blue genie in real life.
And also, Lou, this only goes in one direction. Shredder from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was voiced by the same man who played Uncle Phil. I think you've got, I'll leave that to you on that. But very nice man. Is that fair to say?
Yes, indeed.
And it's a shame that he passed away. But it's interesting to me that he voiced Shredder and nobody had a problem with it. Shredder is Asian, by the way. That character from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because back in the 90s, we had enough sense to know that it didn't matter the color of your skin if you were playing a cartoon character. We just really loved your voice if you had a great voice. And we wanted you to play a plethora of different characters. And in today's world, that's no longer acceptable. And I think that's degeneration.
There were individuals who had that attitude. And I will give you a personal anecdote, or semi-personal. My mother, as you know, was an actress in radio. And there was a very famous show called Duffy's Tavern that was all about an Irish tavern in New York. And the guy who was the creator and boss of the show was from Ireland. My mother was a tall, red-headed, lightly skinned, freckled lady who happened to be of Polish Jewish origin, but she did great dialects. And she went into audition for, remember, a voice part on Duffy's Tavern. And the guy loved her, thought he was fantastic. He called her into his office. He says, "You're going to be a big part of the show. So tell me, darling, what part of the old country do you come from?" And totally naively, my mother said, "Why, I was born right here in Los Angeles, California." Boom. Goodbye. You're gone. So these things have happened in the past, but they haven't become the standard operating procedure of the industry.
Well, let me ask you this, Lou. So we're not going to put it on the screen right now, but there are a number of people out there who have been posting comparisons of the design of Rogue. Let's just say that her model, and it was a kids show, and nobody's been up in arms about this, but in that kids show, her costume was form-fitting, and she had a feminine figure. In the current show, as people are posting all over Twitter, her assets have been declined. How's that? They're okay. No longer there in the same way. Lou, what do you make of this idea that we're going to resurrect things out of the 90s that are beloved and which are not part of anything controversial, and then inject them with said controversy so that we can scrub them when we resurrect them of everything that's offensive to this new movement, this new ideological group, and repurpose it for quote unquote the message? It
even relates to the art of the thing just on its own sake. When I first saw these pictures, the first thing that stood out to me was that sort of semi-mohawk on Storm. The great part about X-Men comics and cartoons was the way her hair would flail around in the wind as she generated these storms.
And that's a symbolic choice, right, Lou? That's a purposeful, iconic choice by the designers.
It's just, what if they gave a storm and no wind blew or something like that?
It's also why she has the cape. In other words, you're onto something really important there, Lou. These characters were designed purposefully to accentuate that which they represent. And when you see them changing that representation to something that represents something totally different from their iconography, you have to step back and go, okay, why did you do that, and what are you attempting to say with it?
And I think what they're attempting to say is, we're different. So there. I mean, that's literally, it's like, oh, it was black, make it white. It was green, make it gold. It was up, make it down. Why? Because we want to. By golly, and we're in charge now.
That's right. The sad thing to me, though, Lou, is that they could make a brand new X-Men show. They could put these characters into that new X-Men show. They could make their own thing. But they're not satisfied with that. And that's really interesting to me. And it harkens back to what we saw with Star Wars. They were not satisfied with doing some new trilogy under Kathleen Kennedy where they did 3 new movies in a new place, in a new time, in a galaxy far, far away. They were adamant to go back and bring back the characters from actors at the ends of their lives, by the way. Carrie Fisher not even able to make it through to the end.
Right.
They went back and pulled those characters to emasculate them, to disparage them, to destroy their legacies, to take away their victories from the end of the original movies. It seems to me strange, and it seems to me to be, I would even say, grotesque. It feels like we are vandalizing these franchises from the past, desecrating them, rather than trying to make something new. And the only reason seems to be because they know they can't make something new that people would watch. And so they have to Trojan horse in audiences with nostalgia. It's nostalgia bait for the sake of getting attention. And then they desecrate the nostalgia in front of the audience's eyes. And I'm not sure how much longer audiences are going to fall for that.
I don't know what decade it was in, but I remember there was this famous show called Beatlemania, where it was guys impersonating the Beatles doing their songs. And the ad line was, not the real thing, but an incredible simulation. These guys seem to take that as not the real thing, and we are going to prove it to you by ruining it.
That's right. Hey, we're a Beatles cover band. You ready for some Beach Boys?
That's what... Exactly. Montevani. The Beatles play Montevani, right?
That's right.
And it's funny. As I told you, when you first said, well, let's talk about the problematic 90s. So I pulled up on IMDb the list of the Disney movies of the 1990s. And when you look at what they were doing then, it starts off with The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, White Fang, The Rocketeer, Aladdin, Newsies, The Mighty Ducks, The Muppet Christmas Carol, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, Cool Runnings. Imagine if all of those were revamped and reworked. But in a way, they are in retrospect, because all of these have a one-line synopsis. And here is the funniest of the many. And you look at the synopsis and you say, well, I don't think they could even say that today. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1996, a movie we all know, directors Gary Truesdale and Kirk Wise. The voices were Demi Moore, Jason Alexander. And here is the official synopsis. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Lou.
Imagine this in 2024. A deformed bell ringer must assert his independence from a vicious government minister in order to help his friend, a gypsy dancer.
I'm shocked. I think in today's time they would call him handy capable.
Yeah, well, I wonder what Mr. DeMeo would say. He says, oh, yeah, well, he's not a hunchback, and that's the best part. And it's not in France, it's in Greece. And by the way, the gypsy dancer, she's lame and gay. But aside from that, we're remaking this wonderful thing because you all loved it.
It's a great point. Lou, I'm reminded that, well, let me give you 2 examples of things that were once considered to push the envelope, and now they would be considered unacceptable in today's world. So one thing would be that I think back to Remember the Titans. I think that came out in the late 90s. It may be the early 2000s, but it's somewhere in that time frame. That would no longer be acceptable. Because Remember the Titans, starring the incredible Denzel Washington, is a story of embracing each other across the lines of race, and I don't think that's highly favored right now in Hollywood. The other movie that I'm thinking of that I think is even more interesting in this aspect is Brokeback Mountain. I've brought this up in live shows before.
Yes.
Brokeback Mountain would not be allowed to be released now because of people on the left, on the tribalist side of this, who would say, well, neither of those actors are of that persuasion, and therefore this is offensive. And at the time, that was seen as something pushing the bar farther in that particular direction. That's how far we have moved, and that's why when I look at the X-Men being brought from the 90s into today and being swapped over, I pause thinking about just how much will have to be changed about them to make them acceptable today. And I don't think that audiences are going to find that to be acceptable, not one bit.
And in a purely commercial way, if your whole point is we're bringing it back, and the next thing you do is make it utterly divorced from what you're bringing back or what it was, the theory behind bringing it back is we'll get all the audience who loved it then to come see it. How many of them will last more than an episode or two once they see how it's been changed? So you're defeating the commercial aspect of why you're reviving that 97 show rather than just saying, here's the new X-Men and going for it.
That's right. It's not a continuation. It's a revision.
And I have to say, although it's happening all over the place now, this has happened in the past. I've seen shows, for example, feature films that are remakes of beloved television series from maybe a decade or two before. I thought, for example, the most obvious example to me was the Will Smith Wild Wild West. Now, you can like Will Smith or not, and you can like the Wild West or not, but it had nothing to do with the show, and indeed went against a lot of what the original show had. And it's like, well, why didn't you just write a funny spy in the West comedy with, what do you need the name for? We bought the name and we bought the rights because we want to get all those people who loved it as a built-in audience. And the first thing we're going to do is tell them, oh, that crap you watched in the old days was no good, and we're going to show you why.
It's not a winning recipe, I would say.
It's not only commercially stupid, it's showing such contempt for the people you, in theory, are trying to appeal to. I mean, go down in that article, he said something about, well, it's interesting to see if everything Xavier said was turned on its head. No, it's not. We liked Xavier and what he said, and we don't want to see it turned on its head.
Right, and we actually believed in it because he was the good guy, and what he was speaking to was bringing people together and putting aside differences.
Yes.
So the idea that we're going to turn that on its head, well, that scares the living daylights out of us because this is going to be propagated in the minds of children. And that's what they want to do, is to flip all of that on its head, as they continue to do over and over.
And the children don't know from the 97 show.
Well, we can only hope the children will go back and watch the first 4 seasons and stop.
But here's what's going to happen is the parents who love the 97 show are going to say, hey, they're bringing back this great show that I used to watch when I was your age. Come on, let's watch it together. And after about an episode and a half, not only are the parents going to say, oh, well, so much for that, the kids are going to say, why did you like this? This is lame.
So, I totally agree. Lame, I think it is.
It's a formula for disaster. It really is.
What we continue to watch over and over, Lou, is it's a Wall Street versus Main Street scenario that is playing out before us. We don't know who's going to win, but I think the market eventually does win out. But this idea that Disney is going to continue to pump out products that people don't care about, and those are going to be subsidized by the institutional investors out there, and that it's not going to impact the stock because Disney is just too big and too important, and it's seen as a vehicle for cultural, what would you say, the transportation of cultural ideas that you would not let pass your door normally, but can be transmitted into the minds of your children through the television set. I'm not sure that's going to win over the next years, but we'll see.
And you have mentioned in the past that a lot of what they've done recently is basically, for example, by ignoring Epic Universe and a lot of other things, Disney saying, well, people will always come to us because the brand is so strong, it doesn't matter what we do. Well, isn't this that in microcosm? People will follow this anyway, regardless of the fact that it's different, because the brand of the X-Men is so strong. It's
That's the idea.
It's the same arrogant attitude that says, we're too big to fail.
It's the same arrogant attitude, Lou, that says, put out Madam Web because they'll go see anything that's related to Spider-Man.
Right.
That's the same attitude, and folks, we know how that works. We're just playing a game of attrition at this point. How long can these companies go without consumers?
Well, look just to the right. Disney to make Sea Witch Ursula into beloved aunt.
Yes. Well,
Same thing.
We'll actually show that real quick to folks just so you know what's happening. Here we go. This is out of thatparkplace.com. Folks, make sure you check out the article. Disney to make Sea Witch Ursula into beloved aunt in Disney Junior's Ariel series. Grace replaced Ariel to be first connection preschoolers have to Ariel. And we're not, we don't care about skin color here on this channel.
And
this is craziness.
The way, the Tiki Room is cultural appropriation, we see to the right.
Make it make sense.
I'm glad they have an ad, and I'm all for them, but I'm kind of surprised they haven't had to rename Brute because, that's brutal.
I see it coming on the horizon, folks.
Pepper Joe's? How dare you? Why isn't it Pepper Josephina's?
That's right. Pepper Josephina's. It's going to happen. Well, Lou, thank you for stopping by That Park Place, the channel, and we're excited to have you back in the very near future. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. Drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts. And remember that Park Place, the YouTube channel, now 4 videos a day, plus multiple live streams. You do not want to miss a thing as we continue to explain entertainment, keep you ahead of the culture curve. We shall not be defeated, destroyed, or disgruntled. We continue forward each and every day. It drives them crazy. So folks, stick it right here, That Park Place, where all the news should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.